Hello everyone. So welcome to our second class on modals. Um, the good news is that we have already seen, everything we need to see last week, and I've taught this a few times, and so if you remember, we ended up with sort of three little pieces of scratch sheets, right? These are sort of the traces of what we did, right? We started with the first one that I'm kind of shaking around here, which is our presentation of epistemic modality, and we kind of just said that, you know, here are the modals we have here, right, in our little diagram, and we've sort of said that we go from weaker to stronger modality. We're going from a smaller chance of something being true to a greater chance, right? Okay. That was the sort of basics that we learned. And we also learned that if we use with epistemic modals, if we use the past tense, it doesn't mean we're referring to past time. It just means we have a lesser chance of it being true. So that this is sort of our sort of sheet that represents that. And then we went on to root modality, and so which has a completely different idea. And when we're talking about root modals, we're not saying something that is necessarily true. Or not. It has nothing to do with the question of whether or not the statement is true, but there is this idea sort of what we sort of loosely called force, and this idea of force can be sort of appear in many different ways, and we notice that each modal has its basic meaning of force. Can being physical capacity, may being permission, will being sort of consequence of volition. Then we have shall, strong obligation, must, have to. We see a sort of an example of that. Here we have, she can swim, you may go, I will succeed. And then we have the difficulty of the past that we looked at here, right? And we said that it was kind of difficult to use modals in the past because modals aren't really supposed to say that something happened at a specific time, right? So if we talk about a specific event in the past, and what we're really trying to say that it actually happened at a specific time, we're very often going to have recourse to what we call an expression of modality, which would be something like she managed to get home on time, instead for elle a pu rentrer à l'heure, or she was able to manage to. So that's what we saw for the second part, and then and that was really basically most of what we really need to see. And then we continued with this idea of the past, and we came back to epistemic modals, but this time we were looking to see how we express epistemic modals in the past. And what we noticed was that there was sort of this basic construction for past epistemic modals, which is modal plus have. And notice we're respecting the basic modal construction, which is modal plus verb stem, right? So have is the verb stem of the verb to have. And then we have this have plus verbian construction, which we have already seen when we look at the present perfect. So we combine the modal construction and the have plus verbian construction. Now, and what I tried to say, or hopefully what we noticed, is that it's a little bit unusual that we use this have plus verbian construction because the meaning isn't exactly the same one as we have with the present perfect or the past perfect. This really has the same meaning of the simple past. So this is used. This have plus verb en part is used to say that we have something going on in the past, because we've noticed that if we use the past form of the modal epistemically, it won't make them. This is what we mentioned here, right, in our first part. It doesn't mean the modal refers to the past. So that means you should really be familiar with this construction. You have the modal plus have plus the verb en or the past participle, right? And that is apply, and that means everything that we've seen in this first part about we're using a modal epistemically, and we are choosing a weaker modal if there are small chances of something being true, a stronger modal if there are greater chances of something being true. We can apply that same sort of scale of values only if we're applying this to a past event. We are going to also add this have plus verbian construction, so we will have something like he couldn't have known the result. So let's say if I'm wondering about something now and I'm thinking that something is sort of possible, hopefully you can see where I'm kind of moving around and say, he could know the result. He might. Right now, if I want to talk about something in the past, yesterday he couldn't, hier, il n'a pas pu connaître le résultat. Yesterday, he couldn't have known the result, right? So that is the construction could. Here we have not, of course, which we can always add not after the first auxiliary verb. And then we have plus have plus verb en known is. So it's very important to respect that construction to know it. Now we saw that, and then we noticed that there were two exceptions. When I say two exceptions, I mean that we have this construction, modal plus have plus verb en, and yet it in two specific cases, and only two cases, can it mean that the modal has a root value. Okay, that's why we say it's an exception. We have the epistemic past form, right? But we use it with the root modal. And the first time that occurs is with a should, and this you just really have to memorize. If I say j'aurais dû faire quelque chose, I should have done something. So that's the construction, should plus have plus done, which is the verb en, right? And that doesn't mean I'm wondering if something's true in the past. It means I'm talking about sort of obligation or atténuated obligation in the past. That's what j'aurais dû. Et ma tante, c'est que oui, c'est une question de devoir. Quelque chose en manquer un devoir. Donc cette idée d'obligation atténuée. And likewise, if we use might or could, it could have either value. So that's I just reviewed what we saw last week. Okay, and now what I'd like to do is I want to keep this same. I've actually some of these. I've modified some of these a little bit, so I'm going to send these. You'll find these. I mean, they might be the same ones you've already seen. But just in case. They're not the same ones that we used. I'm going to put these up on the course this week, but what we're going to do is I'm going to keep these there, keep these sort of on our screen, and I would like to sort of practice doing some translation exercises. Right, we're going to kind of go through some of these and sort of see how we can use those. Okay, we're going to do an old test. So here we have elle a eu de la chance, elle aurait pu se faire arrêter. So here I'm going to write this out. Now the first part, we're just going to go through it. She was lucky. No problem. And then elle aurait pu se faire arrêter. So here he says, here we have this idea of pouvoir. So we have this idea of like could very often, right? Capability. And here elle aurait pu. Here we have to realize, we're talking about the past, right? Okay. And now we notice that, here we have this aurait pu, d'accord. So we've seen this expression, might, could have, plus verb en. So could have, here we have être arrêté, been, right? And here we notice that this is the case where it's not epistemic. We know, elle a eu de la chance, we know that the person wasn't arrested, right? Elle a eu de la chance. But we're talking about a past possibility. So this is just to say that what we've just seen is that might or could can have a root meaning when they have this have plus verb en, which is usually the epistemic construction. So that is to say that we are going to translate this by she could or might, both are possible, have been arrested. Okay. Now we're going to move on to the next one. Vous auriez quand même dû passer plus longtemps dans cette région. And we've just seen this. So here we're thinking, okay, vous auriez même dû. We're thinking, oui. Donc déjà, vous auriez mémorisé cette phrase. Vous auriez même dû. Right away, you should know how to translate this. Really memorize this one. And also we notice, okay, here we're talking about a past. So we're talking about the past, right? First thing, okay, we're talking about a past modal. And here we have vous auriez dû. We're talking about past obligation, right? And it's attenuated obligation. Aurait dû, it's not devait. So we say, past attenuated obligation. We just saw this, right? Here we have the j'aurais dû. Well, that should be this should be the should have construction. So once again, it's going to be should have plus verb stem. So we're going to say you should have passé plus longtemps. No, spent. No, it's important. Spent, that's la troisième colonne. Spent. Ça, c'est le verbe en, participe passé. More time in this region. All the same. Là, c'est tout de même, mais c'est pas... Bon, peut-être on peut faire mieux si vous trouvez quelque chose de plus élégant. Okay, mais there we have that one here. Now we have le gouverneur a dû faire des compromis pour maintenir le consensus. Okay. Encore une fois, un passé. Le gouverneur a dû. Donc we have this idea of devoir in the past, and here the idea is this: we're talking about we have this idea of sort of this the governor was obliged to do something. So we have past obligation. Now we've seen this here when we look at our root values, right? We have the have to. Notice we can usually have must or have to, but when we have the past, we can only have had to, right? Okay, so because must doesn't have a past form that we can use, so we have to use had to for past obligation. So we have the governor. No, I forget how to spell. I'm getting something wrong. Had to. Had to. So that's the important. So we have the had to as the past obligation. Make compromises. Then to maintain. So we have the expression of goal to maintain the consensus, and that's a transparent word. Okay. So now we're moving on to our next one. Si le conseil était descendu avant, nous serions partis plus tôt. Now this not everyone has seen this, but this is really sort of a conditional sentence. So we have this idea of condition, so we're going to be using would. And here we're talking about a past thing, right? Si le conseil était dû. So we're talking about a past unreal thing. So we have sort of like a double, I would say sort of a double non-present, right? So that's going to be a past perfect. And the été, beware of this été descendu. Just because we have été descendu, we could have avait fait quelque chose. Donc don't use to be. This just be, là c'est un plus que parfait avec être. Donc plus que parfait, past perfect. If the counselor had, what's it say, gone down, earlier, then nous serions partis plus tôt. So here we're talking about something that's completely virtual in the past. So we're going to have would, past form of will, would. And then once again, the have plus verb en. So we would have left. Go once again earlier. It's a little bit redundant, but it is functional. Okay, le médecin a pu rétablir l'ordre dès que la foule s'était dispersée. So here we have a pu. Now here so notice we're talking about a unique occurrence of something that happened. This is what we would say like a punctual event in a sort of narrative situation. So notice a pu, we have this idea of pouvoir, so we're talking about ability, but we're not talking about a general ability, right? We're talking about something that happened in unique time. And that's what we talk about here, right? Physical capacity, right? But when we talk about with past capacity plus specific event, we're not just going to be able to use could. We're going to have to use either managed to or was able to, and both will be both are perfect here. So here we're going to say is the doctor. So either you can say managed to, was able to, or managed to rétablir, restore order. So fix it. Dès que, that would be as soon as the crowd. Donc s'était dispersé. Donc we're wanting to say is the crowd is going to. We have at a given point in time here. Here's the timeline. This is the doctor restoring order. The crowd has to disperse before. So that's going to be a past perfect, right? As soon as the crowd, that'll be had dispersed. If you want to be completely accurate there. The next one, le marché est susceptible d'être fermé cette semaine. So here we're saying est susceptible de, just a way of talking about sort of chances of something being true. So this is not really, c'est pas probable, c'est possible. So any one of these, might, can, could, is fine. So might would seem the most natural. Might or could are fine. So the market might be closed this week. Great. Donc nous nous réjouirons quand le facteur passera. So this is very similar to, okay, if the counselor had gone down earlier, we would have left earlier, right? This is what, for some reason this I'm having, why is this not working? This is how it's spelled. I'm sorry. There we go. Okay. Sorry, I was getting mixed up. I don't know why. Something didn't really work that first time. Nous nous réjouirons quand le facteur passera. Donc here we have once again a conditional sentence. We have the condition si le conseiller était descendu avant, and the consequence nous serons. So here we have a past one, and here we have a future one, right? Okay. So in the future one, we're gonna use the present and then with will, right? So we will rejoice, and then when that would be the mailman, I would say stops by, or you could say passes even, but it's a little bit less natural. We will rejoice when the mailman passes by. So that's important how we have the will, because will is used for this idea of condition, right? It's not an automatic program thing, right? This condition has to be met for this to occur. So will often happens like this. So we can have will, or we can have the past, or we can have will or would, or that would have, right? Il a peut-être été en train de sauter cette étape à ce moment-là. So this one is a little bit here we're talking about once again il a peut-être été en train de. So every time I'm asking myself, is this a present or a past thing? A peut-être. So here we're saying we're not sure if it's true. Epistemic past. Il a peut-être été. Okay. With en train de. So we're going to combine this with be plus verbe ing. And il a peut-être, we're talking about that first zone, just like might. I could say might or could. So he could, I was saying could this time, I could say might either, right? I can say can, but it's very unnatural. He could have been sauté cette étape, skipping a step, right? So that is have plus verbe. So here we have modal plus verb stem, have plus verb en, be plus verb ing, right? So c'est le en train that we can add this. So here we have all three. He could have been skipping this step I would say at that time, à ce moment-là. Okay. So that's quick translation. And so now we're going to sort of do modification. So he may use my tapes now. So notice this is it's just a sample giving a permission in the present. And as we've seen on our second one, right? It's kind of difficult. You may go. It's kind of difficult when we want to evoke permission in the past, because what we're referring to is the giving of permission, once again, which is a specific event. So we're going to have to use an expression of modality, like saying something is allowed, right? So I can't say yesterday he might, right? It just doesn't work, because I'm talking about the giving of permission. So I'm going to use once again this expression of modality, not the modal. Yesterday he was. So notice what's happening is the now is being replaced by yesterday. He was allowed to use my tapes. Okay, next one. They must arrive before it's too late. Last week. Okay, so here we have. Here we have, by the way, the idea. We have this obligation. This is not epistemic. They must arrive before it's too late. This is something that this sort of has to happen, right? Okay, so that's the present, right? So here we have present obligation, and we've seen that we have this problem that with present obligation we can use must, but we can't in the past. So once again we have had to. So donc il y avait une obligation passée, so we're gonna have to use last. So last week they had to arrive before it was too late. So we're just transposing once again into the past. Okay, so he can't be sleeping right now. So notice can't be sleeping. We're wondering if it's true. Okay, so here we're going to that means we're going to have our modal plus have. We're going to add to make it in the past. Last Thursday, we're just going to use that basic construction that we use for epistemic modals in the past, which is have plus verb en. And here notice we have be plus verb ing, and that's no problem. We can use both. We've seen that. In our last example, he could have been skipping. It's going to be very similar. So just like we said, he could have been given skipping. We're going to say we could say can't. We could have been can't or couldn't or might. we're going to say couldn't, have been sleeping. I would say now because, I would say right then. The now, oh, right, no, this must be now. I'll fix that, there we go. Okay. And then we're going to just get practice of, how we can use most of these very often the root values, but saying things that we can say in non-modals way with modal mate. So didn't know how to play the piano. That's capacity. Now here, notice we're talking about capacity in the past, and we're only talking about capacity. We're not saying that she did something, on Tuesday or last week, like la a pu. Right? This would be like elle savait, imparfait. So that means since we're only talking about the capacity, we can use the modal in the past. We saw that was almost sort of a rare thing. So that means we're going to say the pianist could play the piano. Oh, I'm sorry. We're not doing this in the past. But it would be could if it was the past. So, oh no, it is the past with couldn't, so it would be couldn't, because this is until she was fully grown. The pianist couldn't play the piano, and I can just finish it until she was fully grown. I'm not going to write the whole thing again for you. So there's no chance that he used the phone. So here we're saying very small chances of something being true. We're familiar with that on our little scale here. Here we're all the way to the right. So it's going to be can't, couldn't, won't, possible, but rare. And so notice, and we're talking about the past, that he used the phone. Okay, so we're going to have this can't, couldn't zone in the past. So we're going to say I can't say he can't have or he won't have, but it's probably the most natural. We'll just do the most natural. Couldn't have used the phone. And what's notice about this is there are less. These are in this. There is no chance. Is sort of this like impersonal constructions. Very often, we can use modals instead of impersonals. Like, il est possible que, he might, right? Il est probable que. This is what we call les constructions impersonnelles. Et ça c'est un autre exemple ça c'est ça serait la construction existentielle, mais c'est quand même impersonnel. So very often we can use modals instead of these il est possible qu'il est probable. So try to get in the habit. Don't say it is possible that, that sounds a little bit French, right? He couldn't have used the phone. Now we have our opponents are not at all likely to resort to that strategy. So that's not that. So we were talking not at all likely. So we could very often it's going to be very similar to this, right? We're really talking about this slow change. So I would say our opponents would. You could use I could say sort of wouldn't. Well, I would say maybe won't resort to, and then that's right. Okay. There are other possibilities. I would say, but I would say couldn't, but can't maybe. Okay, and I suggest you take the train. Now we haven't really seen this, but it is possible to use could or might with try when you sort of want to give advice. You notice. You can be very firm. You can say obligation. You have to do this. You must do this. Or you can use should, attenuated, even more attenuated than should. We can kind of use like might, usually with try. Okay, so you could say, you might try taking the train. Right, and that's sort of. It's nice to think of this idea of these degrees of modality being the strongest modality. Have to, then like should, right? And then later we have you might, so this is sort of where we're getting where suggestion is sort of the mildest form of obligation. It's much softer. So it's good to have that and get used to this expression. You might try taking the train. So I hope that is useful. I'm going to leave it there. It's sort of just so you can sort of see how we can sort of apply what you've learned. And this obviously this document you will find on the on the Moodle page. So thank you very much. Take care.